Chapter 1. 2 hours before Grant Holloway walked through her gates, Vivienne Lockwood ended a man's political career with a 3-minute phone call. She sat in her private study on the 3rd floor of the Lockwood estate, a room no photographer had ever entered, lined floor to ceiling with books older than most American cities. A single desk lamp illuminated the surface in front of her. On it lay a guest list, a financial briefing, and a cold cup of tea she had not touched. The phone was on speaker. A voice in Singapore confirmed the port concession. "Proceed at 19%, Vivienne said. That sentence moved $400 million. She said it with less emphasis than most people use to order coffee. Fiona, her executive coordinator, appeared in the doorway with a leather folder. Vivienne held up one finger. The Singapore line closed. A second call connected automatically. "The committee appointment," said a voice from Washington. Male. Measured. The kind of voice that advised people whose names appeared on ballots. "Senator Whitfield takes the chair," Vivienne said. "The alternative candidate withdraws by Wednesday. He won't like that. He doesn't need to like it. He needs to comply." The call ended. Fiona set the folder on the desk. Inside were final logistics for the evening's gala. 500 guests. Senators, generals, hedge fund principals, foreign diplomats, 3 Fortune 100 chairmen, and one name circled in Vivienne's own handwriting at the bottom of page 4. Grant Holloway. "Priya called about the Lux Media matter," Fiona said. Vivienne opened the folder without looking up. Status. Acquisition closed Friday. Forensic audit confirmed revenue inflation of roughly 40%. Talent contracts frozen pending breach review. Good. Fiona paused at the door. "Is there anything else before tonight?" Vivienne looked at the circled name on the guest list. Her face showed nothing. Not anger. Not anticipation. The calm of a woman who had built a chessboard 3 years wide and was now sitting down to play the final move. "Press my white gown," she said. "The simple one." Fiona nodded and left. Vivienne turned to the window. December dark had already swallowed the grounds. Somewhere beyond the iron gates, the man who had once called her nobody was putting on a rented tuxedo and telling himself he had arrived. She picked up the tea, found it cold, and drank it anyway. The gates of the Lockwood estate opened at 7 sharp. Grant Holloway stepped through them with a woman on his arm and absolute certainty in his chest. He was 41 years old, son of a Cleveland electrician, self-made. That was the word he used in interviews, in keynotes, in the story he told at every dinner party where someone important was listening. He had clawed his way from a 2-bedroom apartment with radiator heat to a corner office in a Manhattan high-rise. He believed in the mythology of his own ascent the way other men believed in gravity. The invitation in his hand was printed on cardstock heavy enough to feel like bone. The gold seal bore an eagle gripping a rose in one talon and a blade in the other. He had turned it over 100 times in 2 weeks. The Lockwood dynasty. Old money in the truest sense. The kind of wealth that did not post vacation photos. The kind that owned the buildings where galas were held and shaped elections without appearing in newspapers. Grant exhaled and looked at Tessa Blaine. She was 24. Beautiful the way expensive packaging is beautiful. Crimson dress, backless, engineered to turn every head in any room. Dark hair pinned with a diamond clip he had charged to his corporate account. 400,000 followers watched her document every rooftop dinner, every first-class flight, every proof that her life was exactly what it appeared to be. She pulled out her phone. "I'm going live," she said. "Tessa." 30 seconds. "The lighting is perfect." She pressed record. The front camera caught the torchlit entrance, the uniformed attendants, the impossible scale of the estate beyond the gates. "Welcome to the most exclusive night of the year," she told her audience. Her voice was bright and practiced. "If you're watching this, you're basically here with me." 32,000 viewers joined in the first 4 minutes. Inside, the entrance hall was vast. Marble floors the color of pale bone. Chandeliers that looked like frozen constellations. The sound of an orchestra drifted from somewhere deep in the building. Grant took a glass of champagne and told himself he belonged. He spotted Roland Crane near a column. Roland was 62, semi-retired, and had been in finance longer than Grant had been alive. He had once been Grant's mentor. He was also one of the most quietly connected men on the East Coast. "Roland," Grant said, extending a hand. Roland shook it. But his eyes did something careful. "A measurement." "You made it." "Of course. What can you tell me about the host?" "I can tell you she is not someone you want to underestimate." Grant smiled. "Mysterious. That is one word for it." Tessa, still streaming, had drifted toward the West Gallery. She moved through the crowd with the camera held at flattering height, narrating in a half-whisper. Her chat was scrolling fast. Hearts and fire emojis, and questions about the dress. Then she saw a woman standing alone near the arched entrance to the gallery. The woman wore white. Not bright white. Winter white. A gown so simple it looked like it had been cut from silence. No visible jewelry except a single strand of pearls. Dark hair pulled back. Still posture. The kind of stillness that does not need to move because the room has already decided to look. Tessa did not know who she was. She angled her phone and approached. "Excuse me," Tessa said with the warm, camera-ready confidence of someone accustomed to making strangers feel included. "Are you with the organizing team? This setup is incredible." The woman turned. Dark eyes, quiet face, not a single feature trying to impress. "No," she said. Tessa laughed lightly, playing to her audience. "Well, you look like you know your way around. These old money crowds can be so—" She waved a hand, searching for a word that sounded witty instead of jealous. "Exclusive." The woman's gaze dropped to Tessa's gown. She studied it for half a second. Most people would not have noticed the assessment. Tessa noticed. She straightened slightly, pleased. "That is a striking dress," the woman said. Tessa smiled wide. "Maison Laurent. Spring collection." "Autumn," the woman corrected gently. "It was moved to clearance when we restructured the label's distribution last quarter. The spring line uses a different drape." The word landed like a coin dropped on marble. Tessa's smile froze for exactly 1 second. Her chat noticed before she... Tessa repeated. The woman offered a smile so slight it barely qualified. "Enjoy the evening," she said, and turned away without waiting for a response. Tessa watched her disappear into the crowd. Her thumb hovered over the end stream button. Something cold brushed the base of her spine, a feeling she could not name and did not want to examine on camera. She recovered fast. Influencers always do. "Okay, that was intense," she told her viewers with a bright laugh. "Old money is a whole different species." The chat exploded with speculation. Tessa changed the subject, pointed the lens at a chandelier, and kept walking. But she did not forget the woman's eyes. Across the hall, Grant had watched the exchange from 20 feet away. He had not heard the words. He had only seen Tessa approach a woman in white and come away looking like someone had pulled a thread from the back of her confidence. He did not recognize the woman. Not yet. Then the orchestra stopped. A single resonant tone moved through the ballroom from somewhere above. Every conversation ceased. Every glass lowered. Every face turned toward the grand staircase. The lights shifted. Not dimmed. Softened. The way light changes at dusk when the sky is deciding what it wants to become. And the woman in white appeared at the top of the stairs. Grant's first thought was that she had not changed position. She had simply been placed higher, and the room had rearranged itself around her the way water rearranges around stone. She descended without hurry. A senator inclined his head, a decorated general, a man with more medals than Grant could count, gave a quiet bow as she passed. A billionaire whose face had appeared on the cover of Forbes 3 times stepped back to clear her path without being asked. Grant felt the glass in his hand slip 2 inches before he caught it, because he knew that walk. He knew the angle of those shoulders, the cadence of that step. the specific way her chin lifted when she entered a room she intended to own. Vivienne Lockwood was Vivienne Hayes, his ex-wife, the woman who had spent their 3-year marriage restoring water-damaged pages of 19th century poetry in a small Boston conservation lab that smelled of old paper and wheat paste, the woman who wore the same gray cardigan every Sunday, the woman whose idea of a perfect evening was public radio and jasmine tea and a kitchen full of books he had once told her made the apartment feel like a museum, the woman he had called nobody on live television at his own engagement party. She was standing at the top of the most powerful staircase in Washington, and she looked like she had been built for exactly that altitude. Tessa pressed close to his arm. Who is she? He could not speak. Vivienne reached the base of the stairs. She accepted a flute of champagne from a waiting attendant. Then, across 50 feet of marble and 100 murmuring conversations, she found him. Their eyes met. Vivienne smiled. Not warm, not cold. Something older than both. The smile of a woman who had set every piece on the board 3 years ago and had simply been waiting for the clock to start. She turned back to her guests without a word. Grant stood perfectly still as the room moved around him. His chest felt like it had been emptied with a spoon. Roland appeared at his shoulder. You have gone white, Roland said quietly. I know her. A pause. I know. Grant turned sharply. You knew. I told you not to underestimate her. That was as much as I could say. Tessa was pulling his arm. Her stream was still running. 41,000 viewers. Babe, the photographer is doing portraits. Let's go before there is a line. He did not move. Grant? End the stream, he said. What? End it. Now. Something in his face reached her. She ended the broadcast without her usual sign-off. The chat screamed in confusion. She pocketed the phone with visible reluctance. What is going on? She whispered. I need a drink, he said. He walked toward the bar after dinner was announced at 9:15. The dining room was a cathedral of polished wood and candlelight, a 40-foot table set with china so fine it looked like it might crack from a raised voice. The seating had been arranged in advance. Grant found his name 7 chairs from Vivienne, close enough to orbit, far enough to feel the distance. Tessa sat beside him and leaned in. I have been asking around. Nobody will tell me anything specific about the host. Her name is Vivienne. Tessa stared. Wait, Vivienne? Your Vivienne? She is not my Vivienne. The librarian? She was not a librarian. She was a conservator. Grant. She owns a palace. He picked up his fork, set it down, picked it up again. Across the table, a silver-haired man whose name Grant did not yet know leaned toward him with the ease of someone who already understood the entire evening. First time at Lockwood? The man asked. Yes. Remarkable place. Remarkable host. He smiled. You two are acquainted? The word acquainted landed with surgical precision. We have met, Grant said. Yes, the man replied, as if Grant had just confirmed something written on a card in his pocket. I imagine you have. The first course arrived. Grant tasted nothing. Then Vivienne stood. She did not clink her glass. She did not raise her voice. She simply rose, and the room went silent, the way rooms go silent for people who have never once needed to ask for attention. Before we begin, she said, I would like to offer a particular welcome to one of our newer guests, someone who has come quite a long way. She paused. In more ways than one. Every head turned. She was looking directly at Grant. Welcome, Mr. Holloway, she said. Her voice carried warmth on the surface, and something precise beneath it, a blade wrapped in linen. I have been looking forward to this evening for quite some time. A polite murmur rolled through the room. To anyone without context, it sounded like hospitality. Grant raised his glass because there was nothing else to do. Under the table, Tessa's fingers dug into his thigh hard enough to leave marks. Vivienne turned back to her soup and began to eat. Grant exhaled through his nose and stared at his plate and understood with absolute clarity that he had walked into architecture he could not see the edges of. At 11:30, Vivienne took the center of the ballroom. She did not call for silence. She simply moved to the middle of the floor, and the crowd adjusted around her the way tide adjusts around rock. 500 people listened. "There is a man in this room," she said, "who believes that the people he leaves behind simply could not keep up. That love is a transaction, that the past can be discarded once it stops being useful." She let 2 full beats of silence pass. "I used to know that man very well." Every eye in the room moved between Vivienne and Grant. "I am not here to humiliate anyone," she said. "I am here to say something I have waited 3 years to say, in a room full of people who understand what it means." She looked at him. "You were loved, genuinely, completely, by someone who had everything and chose you anyway. That was not weakness. That was the most powerful thing anyone in this room has ever offered you." The ballroom did not breathe. "I hope," she said quietly, "that someday you understand the difference between the life you wanted and the life you had." She turned. "Now I believe it is time for dancing. The orchestra has been far too patient." Music rose. Conversations resumed. The room exhaled. Grant stood in the exact center of that exhale and felt, with devastating precision, that he was the smallest person in it. Tessa said nothing. For the first time since he had known her, she had absolutely nothing doors at 12 minutes past midnight. "There is a card game starting," Roland said. "Private room. East wing. The stakes are significant. Her idea, her table, her game." Grant looked through the terrace glass at nothing. Who else? Gerald Ashton, Senator Hargrove, Diana Cho from the Trust's legal division, and Vivienne, a $4 billion investor, a federal senator, the chief counsel of the Lockwood Trust, his ex-wife who apparently owned his company, and him. What happens if I do not play? Nothing dramatic. You stand in this ballroom another hour, go home, and life continues. Roland paused. But certain conversations that might happen at that table will not happen any other way. About the company? About everything. Grant straightened his jacket. "I will play." Roland nodded once, as though he had already placed the bet on that answer. Grant went looking for Tessa. He found her at the bar, talking to a young woman in a blue dress who was leaning in with the specific attentiveness of someone gathering material rather than making friends. He reached them in 8 steps. "Tessa." A moment. The woman in blue smiled pleasantly. "Margot Delacroix. I write for the Continental Review." A journalist at Vivienne's table. Grant shook her hand, moved Tessa away with one palm against her back. Not panicked. Just fast. "She is press," he said when they were clear. "I know. She knew about you. About the divorce. She asked how it felt to attend an event hosted by my fiancé's ex-wife." "What did you say?" "Nothing useful. I am not stupid, Grant." Her voice was flat. "But I need you to tell me what is actually happening tonight." He looked at her. "It is a reckoning," he said. "Vivienne arranged this evening to make a specific point to specific people, with specific witnesses." Tessa stared. "About you?" "About me." She was quiet. Then she said something that told him she was smarter than he had ever credited. "What did you do to her?" He almost dodged. He almost offered the comfortable version. He looked at her face and saw that she had been calculating the shape of this evening since the woman in white corrected her about the dress, and she deserved a straight answer. "I left her," he said, "and I was not kind about it." "How unkind?" "I told her she was forgettable, in front of people." Tessa removed her hand from his arm. It was a small gesture. It said everything. "Go to your card game," she said. "I will be here." The poker room smelled of cedar and old paper. That hit him before anything else. The smell. Vivienne's conservation studio in their Boston apartment had carried the same scent. He had once complained it made the place feel like a museum. Gerald Ashton was already seated, shuffling cards with the ease of a man who had played in rooms like this for 40 years. Senator Hargrove sat jacketless, tie loose, entirely more comfortable than he had looked at dinner. Diana Cho had a glass of water in front of her. No alcohol, the legal mind staying sharp. One chair remained empty. Grant sat. He accepted scotch. He placed his hands on the green felt and waited. Vivienne arrived 3 minutes later. She had changed into something darker and simpler. She sat, accepted the deck from Gerald, and spoke without ceremony. 5-card draw. We play until someone is out, and we talk while we play. She dealt. For the first 30 minutes, conversation stayed general. Markets. A legislative amendment Diana was tracking. A shipping dispute Gerald had opinions about. Grant played carefully, won 2 small hands, lost 1 medium one, held steady, listened. At 12:45, Gerald placed a large bet and said, almost as an aside, the Meredith acquisition did not go the way anyone expected. Grant's hands went still. The Meredith acquisition. 6 months earlier. The biggest deal of his career. His name in 3 financial publications, the framed coverage still hanging in his office. No, Diana Cho agreed mildly. It did not. Vivienne looked at Grant. You led that negotiation. I did. The Meredith board's primary motivation was debt relief, she said. $17 million in undisclosed liability on 2 legacy properties in Maryland. The expansion narrative was packaging. The real driver was survival. Silence. The trust's analysts identified it in the second week of due diligence, she continued. If your team had known about the Maryland exposure, you could have restructured the deal and saved the company roughly 15%. Grant set his cards face down. You knew before the deal closed. I read the report. And you chose not to intervene. I wanted to see what you would do with incomplete information, she said. You always believed you were the smartest person in any room. I needed to understand whether that was something you had earned or something you had simply been allowed. Gerald Ashton cleared his throat gently. Nobody else made a sound. Vivienne continued. The answer was more complicated than I expected. You are genuinely intelligent, Grant. But intelligence without humility moves in circles. It solves the problems it can see and walks directly into the ones it cannot. Grant pushed every chip he had into the center. All in. Vivienne looked at her cards, then at him. Then she smiled, the first unguarded expression he had seen from her all night. Interesting, she said. She called. He laid down 2 pair, kings and tens. She laid down 3 queens. The chips moved to her side of the table. Grant sat back. Something structural behind his ribs, something he had been reinforcing since the day he signed the divorce papers. Diana poured a second water. Senator Hargrove respected his chips. And then Gerald said, the way he might mention weather. Tiana, the Lux Media matter closed Friday, correct? Diana nodded. Forensic audit confirmed roughly 40% revenue inflation across their talent division. We froze all commercial endorsements tied to the top-tier contracts. Breach claims go out Monday. Gerald shook his head. Fraudulent metrics. Inflated brand deals. Manufactured engagement numbers. The entire MCN model was built on vapor. Grant heard the name and felt ice spread through his stomach. Lux Media. Tessa's agency. Tessa had signed with Lux 18 months ago. It was the deal that had turned her from a mid-tier lifestyle creator into a brand partnership machine. She talked about it constantly. My team at Lux. My Lux strategy call. Lux says my Q4 numbers are insane. Grant looked at Vivienne. She had not looked up from her cards. She was studying her hand with the relaxed focus of a woman deciding between a call and a raise. Not a single muscle in her face acknowledged what Gerald and Diana had just described. Diana continued. The trust's position is full liquidation of the management contracts. Talent representation agreements will be voided under the fraud clause. Affected creators will need to renegotiate independently, if any brand is still willing. Gerald pushed chips into the pot. Unfortunate, Some of those creators probably had no idea the numbers were cooked. Most of them did not, Diana agreed. But the agency took the risk. The agency pays the price. Senator Hargrove folded his hand. Messy business. Grant stared at the green felt. His throat had gone dry. Everything Tessa had built, her brand deals, her revenue stream, her identity as a serious commercial creator, all of it ran through Lux Media. And Lux Media had just been gutted by the Lockwood Trust's legal division between hands of poker, the way someone might mention trimming a garden hedge. He looked at Vivienne again. She placed her bet, pushed the chips forward with one finger. Then she glanced up and met his gaze, and her expression carried no triumph, no cruelty, no satisfaction, only indifference, the kind of indifference that told him Tessa had never been a rival. She had never been an obstacle. She had never even been a factor. She was a line item on a quarterly audit that happened to fail compliance review. Grant understood then, not intellectually but physically, in his chest and his hands and the base of his skull, the true distance between his world and Vivienne's. He had spent 3 years believing he had outgrown her. She had spent 3 years letting him believe it. Your bet, Mr. Holloway, Gerald said. Grant looked at the empty space where his chips used to be. I am out, he said. You are welcome to stay, Vivienne said. She did not look up. The conversation is not finished. The table emptied gradually. Gerald left first, then the senator. Diana gathered her files and nodded once to Vivienne before closing the door behind her. Only Grant and Vivienne remained. She squared the deck with careful hands. She set it on the felt. Then she looked at him. Do you want to know the hardest part? She asked. He said nothing. He waited. It was not the divorce, she said. It was not the things you said. It was not watching you walk into my house tonight with her on your arm. She paused. The hardest part was knowing the entire time that you were capable of being extraordinary and watching you choose to be ordinary instead and call it ambition. The words moved through him like voltage. He searched for a response and found nothing. Vivienne did not fill the silence. She let it exist, the way she had always let difficult things exist, without rushing them toward a resolution they were not ready for. I need air, he said. The courtyard behind the east wing, she said. If you need space that is not crowded. He stood. His hand was on the door handle when she spoke again, quietly, to the room in general. He always needed air whenever a room got too honest. He heard Gerald Ashton exhale from somewhere down the corridor. Not quite a laugh. Close enough. He walked out. In the entrance hall, he found Tessa on a bench with her shoes off. She was looking at her phone with an expression he had never seen on her face. Not the bright, curated focus of content creation. Something private. Something uncertain. She looked up. Margot Delacroix published something, she said. 20 minutes ago. She held up the screen. The Continental Review. A piece titled, With Elegant Restraint, What Old Money Tried to Tell New Ambition. It named no one directly. It did not need to. Anyone who had been in the room would recognize every silhouette. Form down. Did you bring me here as a shield? She asked. So she would see you had moved on? He wanted to say no. He built the no inside his mouth. He felt its shape. He knew exactly how to deliver it. He looked at her face. Not consciously, he said. But some part of it, yes. She inhaled. Her jaw tightened. Held. Okay, she said. One word carrying the weight of a confirmation she had suspected since the woman in white corrected her about a dress. I am 24 years old, she said to the window. People think that means I am decorative, that I post pretty pictures and do not think about anything real. She paused. I understood tonight, walking through those gates, that I was inside a situation nobody told me the truth about. I just could not figure out which direction the lie was coming from. Grant said nothing. There was nothing to say that would serve any direction. She is remarkable, Tessa said. I hated her for about 40 minutes, which I think is fair. But she is remarkable. A pause. You should have paid more attention. She put her shoes on. Both of them. Small buckles fastened with steady fingers. She stood, smoothed her dress, collected her clutch. I am going home, she said. Alone. Not breaking up with you in a palace at 2 in the morning. But I need to think. And you need to figure out what you actually want. Not what looks right, not what performs well, what you actually want. She walked to the entrance. An attendant appeared with her coat. She put it on. She turned back once. Something else, she said. I just lost my agency tonight. Grant went still. I heard 2 people at the bar mention Lux Media and frozen contracts. I made some calls from the bathroom. My manager is not answering. My brand inbox has 3 cancellation notices already. Her voice was flat and calm and terrifying in its composure. Did you know about that? I found out at the poker table. From her people? Yes. Tessa looked at him for a long time. She did not even have to say my name, Tessa said. Her people destroyed my entire career between card hands like they were discussing the weather. She buttoned her coat. I do not blame her. The numbers were fake. I just did not know. She exhaled. But I want you to understand what it feels like to realize the person your fiancé threw away could erase your whole life without looking up from her cards. She walked through the doors and into the December dark. Grant stood alone in the entrance hall. Somewhere deep in the estate, the orchestra played its final piece, along the stone benches and the tops of the low hedges, white and precise, every edge clean. Vivienne stood near the center in her dark dress with a coat over her shoulders, face tilted toward the sky. She turned when she heard him. I thought you might come, she said. You recommended it. I did. He stopped a few feet away. They stood in the cold and the quiet, 2 people on opposite sides of something that could no longer be crossed. Tessa left, he said. I know. I saw the car. She knows about Lux Media. Vivienne's expression did not change. The audit was not about her. The agency committed fraud. The trust corrected it. She lost everything tonight. She lost a structure built on fabricated numbers. That is not the same thing. Grant looked at the snow on the hedges. You really did not care about her at all. She was never my concern, Vivienne said simply. You made her yours. That is a different matter entirely. He put his hands in his pockets. The cold was settling into his fingers. The investments, he said. The trust. The acquisition. The information you held back. Was any of it about hurting me? She considered the question. No, she said. Not in the way you mean. I did not do any of it to cause you pain. A pause. I did it because I was paying attention. That is what I have always done with things I care about, even things I have already lost. You still cared, after everything. Caring is not a faucet. You do not shut it off because it becomes inconvenient. She folded her hands. What I stopped was hoping. Those are very different things. He absorbed that. Do you forgive me? He asked. She looked at him in the winter dark. Without the palace lights, her face was quieter. Less composed in the way that things are less composed when they are more true. I forgave you a long time ago, she said. That is not what tonight was about. Then what was tonight about? She was quiet for a long moment. Me, she said. Not you. She turned to the sky again. For 3 years I existed in your version of events. The woman you left behind. The librarian who could not keep up. I needed, just once, in a room full of people who know who I actually am, to be seen clearly. She paused. Does that make sense? Yes, he said. It did. Completely. They stood in silence. Then he said, and it came out rough, I am sorry for the things I said, for the way I left, for not being curious enough to know who you were. Vivienne looked at him for a long time. I know, she said. I heard it in your voice when you said my name tonight, at the bar. A pause. That is enough, Grant. It really is. He nodded, walked toward the glass doors. Her voice caught him at the threshold. Grant. He turned. Start making decisions based on who you actually are, she said, instead of who you have been pretending to be. She had already returned her gaze to the card deck inside, visible through the glass, squaring its edges with the same attention she brought to every damaged thing she had ever tried to restore. Chapter 6. The story broke completely on Monday. Not the Continental Review piece. That had been the elegant first act. What broke Monday was a financial publication with documentation. The headline was direct. Lockwood Trust revealed as controlling stakeholder in Holloway Crane Financial. CEO unaware for 14 months. By 10 in the morning, Grant's phone showed 62 missed calls. He answered the board chair. He let the journalists go to voicemail. He walked into Richard Calloway's office at 9 sharp and brought what was true. Nothing that spun it. The meeting lasted 3 hours. At the end, Richard leaned back. You are not being removed, he said. What happened was not malfeasance on your part. You did not know. The company has performed well. Some of that is the trust's investment. Not all. You built real things here. Grant nodded. What changes, Richard said, is transparency. You will need a direct working relationship with the trust. No more invisible architecture. Agreed. And you will need to tell the team, not a press release, a real conversation. This week. Richard picked up his pen. The meeting was over. That afternoon, Grant walked, not toward anything. Just through the city, through the cold, through blocks he had crossed 100 times without seeing. He passed a used bookshop and stopped outside the window. He thought about Vivienne's studio, about hands that knew how to repair damaged things, about what it meant to pay attention to something until you understood it. He went inside. He bought 3 books. He had no idea why those 3. He carried them home and put them on a shelf that had been curated for appearance, not for reading, and felt like he had started something he did not yet have a name for. Tessa rebuilt without him. She did not collapse. She did not spiral. She sat in her apartment for 3 days. Then she began calling every brand contact she had, personally, without a middleman, without Lux Media's inflated numbers behind her. She lost 70% of her partnerships in the first week. She kept the ones that mattered. She pivoted. Not overnight, and not without stumbling. She stripped her content to the frame and rebuilt it around something quieter and more honest. Authenticity, self-knowledge, the specific courage required to stop performing and start living. Within a year, her audience quadrupled. Not because the algorithm favored her, because people recognized something real. She and Grant had coffee once, 8 months after the gala. It was easy and clean and ended with a handshake and genuine mutual respect, and zero interest in revisiting anything that had passed between them. She never mentioned Vivienne's name. She did not need to. The lesson had arrived on its own terms. She had simply. 2 years after the gala, Grant Holloway lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago's Lincoln Square, smaller than the Manhattan penthouse by a wide margin. A kitchen window overlooking a courtyard. A bookshelf full of books he had actually read. He had taken the corporate partnership with a literacy program the Lockwood Trust funded in 4 cities. Not as rehabilitation, not as image repair, as actual work. He drove to the centers 2 mornings a week and sat with adults who were learning what most people took for granted. He helped in whatever small, concrete ways he could. He was not happy in the loud way he had once pursued happiness. He was something quieter and more durable than that. His father, the electrician from Cleveland, had died the spring after the gala. Heart failure. Quick. Cleveland had died the spring after the gala. Heart failure. Quick. The hospital called at 4 in the morning. Grant drove 6 hours and arrived 20 minutes too late. He sat beside the bed for a long time, holding a hand that was calloused and still and heavier than any hand had a right to be. His father had never pretended to be anything other than what he was. Grant understood now, with the brutal clarity that arrives only after loss, that the man who fixed radiators and read the newspaper at the kitchen table every morning had been the most dignified person he would ever know. He thought about that every day. Vivienne appeared on the cover of a national magazine the second spring, the first profile she had ever agreed to. She spoke about stewardship, about the difference between power that serves itself and power that serves something larger. She mentioned the literacy program's expansion. She did not mention Grant. She did not need to. He bought the magazine, kept it in the drawer of his nightstand where he stored things that mattered. One sentence in the profile he read so many times the page softened at the fold. The journalist had asked what she believed was the truest measure of character. Vivienne mornings. Whether they can be changed by the truth. Not everyone can. Some people hear the truth and build higher walls. But some people hear it and finally open a window. He had been the second kind. Barely. Just in time. Just enough. One morning in January, 3 years after the gala, Grant sat at his kitchen table with coffee he had made properly, and a worn book open in front of him. Light came through the window. The city was already moving outside. He thought about Vivienne, not with longing, not with regret, with the clear, specific gratitude of a man who understood that the most important lesson of his life had been delivered by someone who owed him nothing and gave him everything anyway. She had not saved him. She had not tried. She had simply told him the truth in a room full of witnesses and walked back into her own life and left him to decide what to do with it. Every morning since, he had been deciding. That was the whole of it. Not a single dramatic redemption, not a climactic moment of transformation. Just the quiet, daily, unglamorous choice to be honest with himself, with the people around him, with the distance between who he had been and who he was still becoming. A man who mistakes cruelty for strength will eventually enter a room where strength has no interest in cruelty, and in that room he will learn, if he is lucky, that the most powerful thing a person can do is not to destroy the ones who failed them. It is to outgrow them so completely that revenge becomes irrelevant. Vivienne Lockwood had done exactly that, and the door she closed behind her never opened again. If you enjoy bold, satisfying stories with sharp and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.